Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Micha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. So Charity Cup online tournament has just started, lots of prominent grandmasters are playing there. There are rapid games, 15 minutes and 10 seconds increment per move, so we are expecting a lot of tactics. Already in the first round there was an interesting game between Jorden van Foreest and David Anton Guijarro. Let's see what happened. Jorden van Foreest had white pieces and he started with e4, c6, d4, d5, e5, and we have advanced variation of Caro-Kann, and sometimes they play c5 trying to undermine this d4 pawn, but bishop to b5 is by far the most popular move, and this is what happened in the game. Bishop goes to b5, white usually responds with knight to f3, bishop to e2, maybe h4 also, but in this game white had decided to play g4, immediately challenging this bishop on f5. Of course, at some point bishop will go back to g6, but before black plays bishop to e4, attacking rook on h1, trying to create additional weaknesses in the white camp, because white is forced to play f3. Black plays bishop goes to g6, and now white plays h4, trying to play h5, trapping black bishop on h6. So black immediately counteracts with h5, preventing this unpleasant h5 push from white, and now white plays knight to f3. Well, you might think that black can gain a pawn by capturing pawn on g4 after white would recapture rook to h4. Well, the problem is in this position white would probably play knight to f4, attacking bishop on g6, because if black would recapture with f pawn, we would have triple pawn along the g file, not very pleasant. And if bishop would go, let's say, back to h7, then e6 is again very unpleasant move. If black plays f6, we have like pawn on e6 like a bone in the throat, and if black captures, again, this is a very bad pawn position, and white definitely gets a lot of edge here. Okay, so in the game black plays e6. White responds with knight to f4, again attacking bishop on g6, threatening to double the pawns along the g file. Of course, bishop can go back to let's say h7, but then white simply captures his pawn on h5. So black plays knight to e7, further reinforcing bishop on e6, and now white continues with knight to c3. Of course, at some point black definitely wants to push c5, undermining this defender of pawn on e5, but if black does it immediately, for example after c5, we have knight to b5, very unpleasant, preparing to jump on d6 square. Of course, black can defend with a knight from e5 to c6, then this d6 square is defended by the bishop, and then this knight on b8 is deprived from the natural square, so maybe not the best option for black. So in the game black plays a6, protecting b5 square, preparing this c5 pawn push, but white is on the move and captures this bishop immediately on g6. Black doesn't want to get double pawn, so knight recaptures, and now white plays bishop to g5, attacking queen on d8. So black further develops and also defends the queen. Bishop to e7 was played, and now white plays f4. This bishop is now double protected. If black tries to capture this bishop, white simply captures with the h pawn, and now this h pawn on a5 is h5 is going to be captured. Cannot capture on g4 because then rook on h8 is not protected. But you might wonder, hey, what about if black tries to trap this bishop? If, let's say, black tries with the f6, attacking this bishop on g5, well, white simply responds with g pawn captures on h5, counter-attacking knight on g6. Of course, this f pawn captures, h pawn recaptures. Even if black removes the knight back to f8, then we have h6, very unpleasant move. Again, if f pawn captures, then h pawn recaptures on g7, forking both rook and the knight. And even if black would capture pawn on h6, queen to h5 is the winning move. King has no other option but to go to d7, and then bishop simply captures on h6. White is a pawn up. Black king is deprived from castling, and in general black position is very bad. So in the game black has first decided to get rid of this h pawn. So h pawn captures on g4, queen recaptures, and now black finally gets to play c5, attacking this pawn on d4, one of the defenders of pawn on e5. Of course, if white captures on c5, the knight simply recaptures on e5. F pawn can recapture, but then bishop captures here on g5. Pawn cannot recapture because then goes a rook. Of course, if queen captures, of course, queen captures again. This white is lost here. So in the game, white has decided to play bishop to d3, targeting this knight on g6, who is very unpleasant here. And black responds with c-pawn captures on d4. Now this is a very tricky situation. As stated before, white simply cannot grab this pawn back, because after knight to e2, again knight simply captures on e5, and after pawn captures, again we have this unpleasant bishop captures on g5. So in this position, white has decided for the correct continuation, bishop captures on g6, removing this unpleasant, very strong knight on g6. Now black is the one who has to grab one piece back. Black can either capture on g6 or this knight on c3. Of course, if black captures here on g6, queen captures on e6, so black has decided to capture knight on c3. Now again, very tricky situation. Still, this bishop on g6 is hanging. White would decide to retreat with bishop to, let's say, d3. Then first black would capture bishop on g5. After f-pawn would recapture. Then black would be able to capture pawn on b2, attacking rook on b1, a1, rook to b1, trying to grab it, would not help. After that, queen to c7, and if rook captures on b2, we have queen to c3, forking both king and rook. So here in this position, black would be 2 pawns up and would be definitely be in almost winning position. So the bottom line is here, white cannot retreat with bishop, and white has found the correct continuation. Probably it was a pre-calculated. Queen captures on e6, very stunning move. Of course, queen cannot be captured because pawn on f7 is pinned, and white threatens with capturing here on f7. Of course, if c-pawn captures on b2, then white captures on c7. Check, king can only go to f8, and after bishop to g6, white threatens with checkmate here on f7. There's nothing black can do about it. Of course, pawn can capture on a8, and when this king is gone, can capture another rook on h8. Aside from that, there are some unmeaningful checks, but anyway, queen to f7 is unstoppable mate here. So in the game, black captures bishop on g6. Of course, at some point, queen will recapture with check, but first white castles king side, targeting this pawn on d5, who is going to be captured. There's no point in pushing forward because rook simply captures. If queen captures, we have queen to e7 checkmate. But even if black would capture pawn on b2 check, king would simply go to b1. King is safe here and cannot be checked, so this is there. Here is no problem for white. So in the game, black has decided to play knight to c6, further reinforcing bishop on e7. And now white continues with the attack. Rook captures on d5, attacking queen on d8. Maybe black would try with queen to c8, trying to exchange queens, but in the game, black has decided to play queen to b6. Of course, black is in difficult position, but this move is very bad. You will see immediately why. In the game, white captures pawn on g6 with check. King has no other option but to go to f8, and now another stunning move. Bishop captures on e7 check again. Well, now you see why queen to b6 was bad. If knight captures on e7, here white simply gains the queen for free. If, however, king captures on e7, then we have queen to g7 check. Now king has only two options. If king goes to e6, queen to d7 is checkmate. And if king goes to e8, then queen captures rook. And once this king is gone, queen captures another rook. So this is winning for white. So in the game, black plays king goes to g8. And now white plays bishop goes back to a3, because you have to keep in mind this b2 square is still under attack. And now black plays queen to e3 check. Of course, king cannot go to d1 because queen to f3 we have check, and black is forking all these pieces. So in the game, white plays king to b1, and now black responds with rook to h6, attacking the queen. Queen goes back to g4. Black senses that at some point rook goes to d7, attacking this pawn on g7. So black runs with queen to h8, and of course now rook goes to d7, attacking the pawn on g7. Rook goes to g8, defending, and now rook to g1 three times. Pawn on g7 is twice attacked, only twice defended. So rook goes to h7, and now you can see this king is trapped here and can only defend himself. Black is in a lost position. There are many ways to finish the game. For example, advancing with an h pawn would definitely be one of the options, but first white had decided to capture this pawn on c3 because, of course, white king needs an escape square here just in case. And black responds with knight goes to a5 with the idea of knight to c4, trying to prevent this king to b2. You will see later why is this important. And here white had a very effective finish at his disposal. For example, white could have tried with rook goes to g7, threatening with rook to g8 with checkmate. Here in this position, queen would have to capture rook on g1 because, for example, if rook from h5 captures on g7, it's queen to h5 check. Black can only defend with rook to h7. After that, rook captures on g8, king can only recaptures, and after queen to e8, it's check, king can only go to g7, and after bishop to f8. Now the only option again for king is, I don't know, either h8 or g8. Let's say after king to g8, bishop to h6, checkmate. If, however, in this position, rook from g5 captures on g7, then we simply have queen to c8 check. Now the only option for black to prevent check is rook to g8, and after rook to g8, it's checkmate. So as stated before, here queen should capture rook on g1. After queen recaptures, now rook captures on g7. We have two rooks versus queen. Well, white has additional 3 pawns. This is winning for white. For example, let's say rook goes to b6, attacking the knight. After knight to c4, queen goes to h6 check. After rook to h6, we have rook to f6, and after, let's say, rook from h5 to g7, bishop to f8, this rook is pinned, is going to be captured again. This is totally winning position for white. But okay, it was a rapid game. White didn't have time to calculate all the variation and saw things a little differently. So in the game, bishop to b4 was played, taking the knight. Knight goes to c4. Now trick from b4 doesn't work anymore, because, for example, if now rook captures on g7, after queen recaptures rook, queen captures queen, after rook captures rook, well, once this queen is gone, it's going to be made here along the first rank, because b4 b2 square is now protected. So in the game, white plays rook goes to d4, attacking knight on c4. Black defends with b5. Now rook to e3, attacking the queen. Queen goes back to b6, and now white plays bishop to d6. Of course, knight can capture, but then pawn recaptures and only advances along the d file. So black plays queen goes to d2. And now white has finally decided to push his h-pawn. So h5 was played, and black plays knight to e3, attacking the queen. But more scary is black also attack this c2 square. If queen goes to c2, then this is lost for white. So white simply captures knight on e3. After queen recaptures, white play e6, clearing this e5 square for the bishop. Let's see what black can do. Not very much. Well, let's say queen captures pawn on c3, then simply rook to e5, attacking the queen. After queen to b4, checking to a1, queen goes back to e7, preventing this e7 pawn push. Yeah, that's true, but after queen to g6, black is totally lost. Let's say white threatens with h6. If black makes a random move, then after h6, rook cannot capture, because after queen to h6, it's checkmate. However, black makes a random move, then h-pawn captures on g7. After rook from g5 recaptures, queen to f7, then this rook is pinned, and after queen captures queen, pawn captures queen, and it's going to be made pretty quickly. If, however, black would try with, let's say, a queen to h4, trying to grab this pawn on h5, white simply plays e7, and if, for example, now queen captures pawn, again we have this unpleasant h6. If, however, queen captures pawn, then we would have bishop to g7 check. If rook captures from h file, then queen captures queen. It's end for black. And if, for example, rook from g file captures, white promotes, and it's going to be made in a couple of moves. There's nothing black can do about it. But anyway, in this position, black has decided he has enough, and therefore resigned the game. So I hope you like this game. I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.